Let me turn on the pointer. Yeah, great. So we are good to go. Good evening, all. Welcome all of you to another live problem solving session for the course Introduction to Semiconductor Devices, which is being conducted by Professor Naresh Imani from IIT Hyderabad. Just to introduce myself again, since few of the people may be new here. So I'm Soham Lakhote, currently a fourth year PhD student at the EC department of ISC Bangalore, and my research area is in the field of vital signs monitoring using the radars on chip. So that is the analog and RF circuits, right? So just for the sake of again organization, we will have a session for 50-60 minutes. After that, we will take a break for 5 or 10 minutes, depending on how many questions are remaining. And again, we will resume our session after the break. And all the sessions, all the recordings, as well as the lecture notes that are that will be uploaded in this YouTube channel. So I have already copy pasted its link in the chat section of this Google Meet. So you can go there and subscribe to the channel just to get the real-time notifications. And in the description section, you will find a link to the folder where I am uploading all the lecture notes. So you can access that as well. Okay, so now before going to the drift, diffusion current, the quasi Fermi levels, and the energy band diagram, electric field, just to I have not covered this part in the last lectures. This is regarding the compensated semiconductor. So let me just turn on my pen. So the one doubt that I had in my mind when I was in BTech, just attending the courses like you, was what is even the use of having the compensated semiconductors, right? Because why do we even want to dope the semiconductors with both donors as well as the acceptors? It doesn't make any practical sense, right? So now we will first look why these compensated semiconductors are so important, and why are we having two types of dopants, or why are we having two types of impurities in the intrinsic semiconductors, that is donors as well as the acceptors. So now to understand why we need this, so first of all we have to look at the structure of the MOSFET. This will be taught in very much depth by sir in the upcoming weeks. So I will just give you a quick overview over here. So now this is what you call as the P-type MOSFET. So there are two types. One is the P-type and one is the N-type. Right? So we have a N-type substrate over here. And now if you look, so these are your source and the drain regions. If you don't understand anything regarding this terminologies, it is completely okay. I'm just giving this example just to make you understand why we need the compound semiconductors. So now we already have, so if you see the source and drain, they are P plus. The plus sign means heavily doped. This means heavily doped. You will also see this sign in the when sir will start teaching about the diodes. Okay, so now we already have a N-type substrate, right? It will have some doping, right? And now on top of it we want to build a P plus region, right? So it is not that you have a intrinsic, so if the case was something like this, if you had only intrinsic carrier concentration, this is the normal silicon, and here you want to build a P plus type doping, then we would not have used the compensated semiconductor because this silicon is intrinsic. But if you look at the structure of the MOSFET, first of all we have a N-type doped region. We have a N-type doped region over here, and in this N-type doped region I have to do a doping in such a manner that this small rectangular region becomes a P plus dopant, right? So if this was a normal case where this was an intrinsic semiconductor, then there was no need to apply these compensated semiconductor equations, right? There was no need for doing that. But because the structure of the MOSFET is looking something like this, and you will understand why we dope it with the N-type and P-type over here, right? So now because the structure of the MOSFET is looking something like this, I have to make sure that within this N-type region, I already have some donor concentration with me. Whenever I am trying to make this region, I introduce so many acceptor atoms that they overcome the concentration of the donor atoms, and the region becomes P plus, that is heavily doped P region, right? So if you look at the difference between these two cases, you will clearly understand. Okay, somebody wants to join. Yeah, if you look at both the cases, this is not the case of compensated semiconductor. This is not the case of compensated semiconductor. And if you look at this case, this is looking like a case of compensated semiconductor, right? And who will do this doping? Of course, you won't be doing it. Foundry will be doing the doping. And how the foundry, let's say TSMC, will do this doping? So there are two processes that exist. One is called as a diffusion and one is called as the ion implantation. So we mostly use the ion implantation, and even this doping techniques you will study in depth. So in one of the weeks, sir will cover how these MOSFETs and other devices are actually fabricated. So when you are trying to do this ion implantation, so these P plus regions that you are seeing over here, so they are created by the ion implantation process, right? And over there you have to decide this doping such a way that the entire region becomes P plus even when there is a background n type concentration that is actually existing. So I hope the doubt is clear why we want to use the compensated semiconductors and why are we even studying it. So the concept is not at all useless. It is actually being used by the foundry to make sure that this region is indeed P plus even in the presence of the background donor dopant concentration, right? So I hope this concept is clear. Now we will start our a quick overview of what has been taught. So the first thing that we had seen was regarding the drift current. So drift current is nothing but simple. You have a semiconductor slab that is shown over here. All the diagrams have been taken from the Donald Niemann, and now you are applying certain potential difference across this slab. So now we just wanted to know what actually happens, and we applied all the equations that we had studied in the high school physics. That is your J is equal to sigma E. We also used R is equal to rho into L by A, right, to calculate the resistivity or conductivity of this slab, right? And we solved few numericals in the last session as well, right? And sir must have covered one or two numericals in the lectures as well, correct? So now this concept is very much clear. And by the way, since this semiconductor slab is existing at a finite temperature, electrons will still have a random motion. So in the case number A that you are seeing over here, electron had a random motion, but there was no potential difference that was being applied across the semiconductor slab. So even though electrons were moving, they were moving in the random fashion. And if you look at the net displacement of the electron, first it moved from here to here, then it moved to path number 2, then it moved to path number 3, and again it returned back to the same path. So there was no net displacement, right? So when we apply the electric field, this net random motion will still be there. But if you look at these points, right, this was the initial point and this was the final point of the electron. So actually you can see there is some delta D difference between these 2 points, which was not existing in the case number A, right? So what does this mean? When you apply the electric field, the random motion of the electron still persists, but the electron which was randomly traveling, so it is actually having a net displacement with respect to time, which was not the case with the case number A, where I had not applied any potential difference, right? So now next the new thing that we studied, it was about the diffusion current, right? So now what did we say? So of course the best way to imagine this is imagine this is a room and there is a chamber over here. So somebody has introduced a lot of gas over here and the chamber is completely closed, right? So now what happens when the chamber is opened? So of course the gas molecules will try to diffuse from the left side to the right side, and you must have studied this in the chemistry of your 11th and 12th standard, right? So now this diffusion process happens until and unless these gas molecules are equally distributed throughout the room over here, correct? So now in the similar manner, if we understand this, that there is a concentration gradient. So what do I mean by concentration gradient? The number of electrons that are present on this side, they are much higher in concentration compared to the electrons that are present in this region, right? So now if this electron concentration actually exists, the gradient actually exists, then the electrons will actually try to move from the region of high concentration to the low concentration. That is the direction which is shown over here, right? And if electron starts to move from right to left, then you know that the current that will flow because of this will be in the opposite direction, that is from the left to right, right? So this is why the direction of this arrow, the electron diffusion current density, has been drawn in the opposite direction. But for the case of holes, the direction where the holes are actually moving, the same direction it will be for the current density caused by the hole, the diffusion of holes, right? So that is why you can see that arrows are same, right? So now because of this stuff, there exists opposite signs. So if you look at the diffusion current density, right, then the sign for the holes is negative over here, because since we have assumed that this is the positive x direction, the current density because of the holes is actually in the negative x direction. So that's why there is a negative sign. And if you look at this Jn over here, since the current density, because of the diffusion of electrons, it is actually in the positive x direction, right? So if you just look over here, these arrows are completely in the same direction. So that's why we have a plus sign over here, right? So I hope this stuff is very much clear to you. And now we, first of all, the question again is, why do we even want to study this drift and diffusion? So what are the practical relevance of it, right? So you may have heard about the devices, something called as a diode, then something called as the MOSFET, whose structure I just showed you a few slides back, and something called as the BJT, right? Now if you just look at the current equations, right, if you just look at the current equations with respect to what, with respect to the applied voltage, with respect to the applied voltage across the terminals of these devices. For the diode it is exponential, for the MOSFET it's a square law, it's a square law. I am ignoring the case for sub-threshold region. You will see what is this sub-threshold region. I am not explaining it over here. Sir will cover this part in very much depth. And for BJT, again, it is exponential. Right? Now, you understand how relevant are these equations, of course, for the device people, as well as for the circuit people like me. Unless and until I know the function f of v with equal to I, unless and until I know this function, I cannot calculate the gain of the circuit. I cannot calculate the gain of the circuit. I cannot even calculate the bandwidth of the circuit, right? So these are very important parameters for me. So you understand that knowing this equation f of v is equal to I is of extreme importance, because you cannot model the equations, you cannot model the current for the MOSFET or BJT when you are trying to simulate it in the Cadence software or any other circuit simulator, right? So we understood that this, knowing this equation is very much important. Now how this function is shaped. So for the devices where the current is majorly because of the diffusion, and for the devices where the current is because of the drift, right? So you will see that the current flow that actually happens in the diode and the BJT, the majority part of it is actually caused by the diffusion, and that's why they have the same function, the exponential, the relation between the V and I, right? So both of them have the exponential relationship, because the what you can say, the nature of the current is actually determined by the diffusion process, whereas for the MOSFET it's a drift device, it is driven by the electric field. So the electrons actually flow because of the electric field and not majorly because of the diffusion. So that's why the nature of the function is actually different for the MOSFET compared to other devices like diodes and the BJT, right? And unless and until I know this function, I cannot even design any circuits, because I want the modeling. For my circuit designer to design the circuits properly, I need to model the behavior of this MOSFET and BJT properly, right? So unless and until I know what is the process which is causing the movement of the carriers, I cannot model it with the either with the exponential or either with the square law. And unless and until I know this function, I cannot put the model of these devices into my circuit simulator. And if I don't have the model for the device in the circuit simulator, I won't be able to design the circuits properly, right? So I hope you understand now why studying the drift and the diffusion is very, very important, and how it will result into the inefficient design of the circuit. That means you won't be able to design the circuits for the specifications of the bandwidth and the gain that you are seeing over here, right? So I hope it is very much clear. By the way, guys, please feel free to poke me if you have any doubts. I am not able to look at the chat section since I am presenting my screen. So please feel free to unmute yourself. Okay. Okay. Somebody wants to join. Okay. Yeah. So now this will be the question for you guys. So now, can this diffusion? So I told you about this diffusion process, right? So for the gas chamber, I made one statement. What was this statement? So the gas molecules, they will continue the diffusion till the point the gas molecules are actually spread throughout the room, right? So their concentration, even if you go from left side of the room to the right side of the room, you will see that the concentration of the gas molecules is uniformly spread throughout the room, right? But now I'm asking the same question to you now. So now let's say, let me just draw it. So on this side I have a concentration, and on this side let's say this is the length of the semiconductor slab, and now this is the concentration of electrons that I have. So you know this is n of x function, right? This is n of x, and maybe I can write it something like mx plus c, because it's a completely straight line, right? So you know the equation of the straight line is nothing but mx plus c. So now the thing that will happen now, let me just draw the semiconductor slab over here, and let me try to draw a diagrammatical picture over here, right? So what I am saying, the concentration of electrons is extremely high in this region, correct? It is extremely high, and it will decrease as I go from the right to left, as I go from the right to left, correct? Now my question to you guys, when will this diffusion process stop? When will this diffusion process stop? Can this diffusion go on continuously, that means for infinite period of time? So this is the first question, can this diffusion go on till infinite period of time? Second question, will this diffusion go until and unless the this diagram, right, after certain period of time, after certain period of time, will this diffusion happen in such a way that if I observe this diagram, that is the concentration versus length, will it become something like this horizontal line? Will it become something like this and only then the diffusion will stop, or something else will happen? So I want some inputs from you guys. Sir must have taught this, or if he has not taught, then just use your imagination. When can this diffusion process stop? Yeah, somebody has raised hands. Sardar Kamaljit Singh, can you please unmute yourself? You are still muted. Can you please unmute yourself? Guys, just unmute yourself. Even if you give wrong answers, that is okay. We can still, I will pick your wrong answer, then we can still go in the correct direction. I'm not able to hear you properly. Can you please speak little bit loudly? Just a minute. I'm still not able to hear. Let me check my device settings. Just a minute. Yeah, yeah, my device volume is good. Can you speak little bit loudly? Sorry. See, I want I at least want some answers, unless until I won't be able to go ahead. Okay. So the first answer that I got was that when the dn by dx equal to 0, then the diffusion stops. Okay, very good. Any other answer, guys? Okay, so let's start from here. So now, okay, so the most logical answer that seems is dn by dx. When the gradient completely becomes 0, then the diffusion stops, right? And this is the answer that anyone will give if he doesn't know actually what is actually happening inside the semiconductor. So let's go very step by step. So I'm just drawing a lot of electrons over here. I'm just drawing a lot of electrons, correct? So there are a lot of electrons and they want to go from the right to the left side, right? So when they go from the right to left side, so if this electron actually moves, see, why did this electron appeared in the first case? Because the dopant concentration is extremely high over here. And who is the dopant? Let's imagine I have the phosphorus atom with me. Let's say I have the phosphorus atom with me, and you know phosphorus brings one extra electron, right? When it is ionized, then this electron is capable of participating in the conduction, right? So now when this electron, extra electron from the phosphorus is actually removed. Removed means it goes away from this phosphorus atoms. Then you know that the phosphorus atoms takes the charge of 1 plus, right? Because it had one extra electron and that electron is gone away. That is, it has detached from this phosphorus atom, and now that electron is now actually participating in the conduction, right? Now who brought these electrons over here? They are actually brought because of the phosphorus atoms. So now when this electron actually moves from the right to the left side over here, what actually happens? This phosphorus atoms develops a plus charge, right? And only electrons are capable of moving. This phosphorus that you are seeing over here, right, it is getting bonded with four other silicon atoms, right? So let me just draw a quick picture over here. So let's say this is P, this is Si, this is four silicon atoms, right? It is covalently bonded with these four silicon atoms. Now a very simple question to you: if this electron is detached and if this electron is free to move, I just have one question: can this phosphorus atoms, which is being covalently bonded with four other silicon atoms, move out of the lattice? Does this phosphorus atom has the potential to move? This is a simple question that I'm asking to you. No, right? Exactly. So that is why you will hear in the you will hear in multiple lectures or in many books that this is immobile. This is immobile charge. So this plus that you are seeing over here, the charge that has developed on this phosphorus, because its if electron has moved away from it and has participated in the conduction, that is why you will see a immobile charge, positive immobile charge will be developed over here. So now if this happens for the multiple electrons that you are seeing over here, if they start detaching from these phosphorus atoms, right, if they start detaching from these phosphorus atoms, then there will be a region of immobile positive charges that will be created. Why immobile? I have just gave you the reason, and one of the guys just answered that this phosphorus atom cannot move because it has been covalently bonded with the four other silicon atoms, right? So this region that you are seeing, it will be becoming positive, positive, positive and positive, right? Now what will happen, since this electron is moving, it is going somewhere, right? It is at least going somewhere. So now what will happen? So now when this electron actually goes from here to here, since there is a positive charge that has already been created, this electron concentration will actually start increasing in this particular region, and this region will actually develop the negative charge. It will develop the negative charge, correct? So and when this electron is actually this electrons is actually traveling from the right side to the left side, and when they move to the left side, so they left behind the positively charged immobile charges, and now because they appeared on the left side, so they actually on the left side became more negative. So now if you look at what is actually happening over here, so now there will be a electric field that will be developed because of this process. Why electric field? Because I have the charges on both the sides over here, and if you look at the direction, it will be from positive to negative, right? It will be from positive to negative. So now this is the direction of the electric field that is created because electron wants to move from the right side to the left side. And why does electron wants to move? It wants to move because of the concentration gradient. So ultimately the origin of this electric field is because of the concentration gradient that is actually existing in the semiconductor slab, correct? So this is the gradient that I'm talking about, right? So now let's look at this electric field direction. So now if this if what will happen after a certain point, let's say another electron, it wants to move from the right side to the left side. Now what will happen because of this? There already exists an electric field within the semiconductor slab because of the concentration gradient, and now this electric field is in the same direction where the electron wants to go. And you must have studied in the high school physics that electron will go in the opposite direction of the electric field. So if electron wants to go from the this right side to the left side, and if again the electric field already exists from the right side to the left side, then this field that you are seeing over here, it actually opposes the movement of this electron, right? So if this field was not at all existing, then the answers that I got from you guys, that this diffusion process will keep on going until and unless the dn by dx will become 0. So this answer would have been true if this electric field was not created, right? since this electric field is now created because of the origin of the because of this concentration gradient, right? So because of that, there is already existing an electric field which will oppose the motion of this electron now. And after certain point, this electric field will become so strong that no electron from the right side can actually move to the left side. And why is it happening? See, after first electron moved, only this much part was present with me. After the second set of electrons moved, I only had this much part left with me, right? So now as the electrons are actually moving from the right side to the left side, this field that you're seeing over here, it is becoming stronger, stronger and more stronger, right? So after a certain point of time, this field will become so strong that none of the electrons from the right side can actually go to the left side, and that is the exact time. That is the exact time when the diffusion process will actually stop. So now what will happen? So if I just draw some concentration gradient for you, if I just draw some concentration gradient, then it will look something like this. So now after certain period of time, this concentration gradient, right? So its slope may decrease a little bit. Its slope may decrease a little bit, but it will stop right there because of the creation of this field that is present because of the concentration gradient in the semiconductor slab, right? So the dN by dx equal to 0, this answer was true for the gas chamber, right? Where the gas molecules were moving from the left to right side. But over the case that you are seeing over here, so since there is a, what you can say, the immobile positive charges are created over here, so they are actually giving rise to the electric field, and this electric field becomes so strong after certain point that none of the electrons can go from the right side to the left side. So this is the field. This field will help sustaining this concentration gradient. This field will actually help in sustaining this concentration gradient. I hope the answer is very much clear to you, that why there exists an electric field, why the diffusion process will not go on till the dN by dx becomes equal to 0, and why it will stop somewhere in the middle itself, right? So now we will solve one numerical based on this, not right now, but I have this numerical maybe in the second or third problem. So we will see how we can solve it, and so we will just calculate the magnitude of this field when the diffusion process actually completely stops, and the diffusion and this electric field, they completely balance out with each other. So what do I mean by balancing out? So the diffusion current density and the drift current density, so both of them will actually cancel out with respect to each other, and you will see that the semiconductor will remain in equilibrium despite the fact that there exists a field from the right to the left side. I hope it is very much clear to you. So if you guys have any doubt, please feel free to poke me. So I will move on with the set of problems now. Just give me a second. Yeah. So now let's start with the problem number 1. So it has been taken from the try yourself examples from the Donald Niemann. So the whole concentration in silicon varies linearly from x equal to 0 to x equal to 0.01 centimeter. The whole diffusion coefficient dP is 10 centimeters square per second, and the whole diffusion current density, that is the J diff, is 20 ampere per centimeter square. The whole concentration at x equal to 0 is given to me as 4 into 10 to the power 17. The question they are asking to me is, what is the value of the whole concentration at x equal to 0.01 centimeter. Now first of all, they have just given me that the whole concentration varies linearly from x equal to 0 to x equal to 0.01 centimeter. So now let me draw two possibilities over here, right? So now this is length, or maybe I can write x, and this is my concentration of holes. So the linear fashion that you are seeing, it can be with the positive slope, or it can occur with negative slope as well. I don't know how it will occur because they have not given it to me, right? The only thing that I can know, I have to find it out, whether the whole concentration is actually increasing with the distance, or whether the whole concentration is actually decreasing with the distance, right? So now they have given me the value of whole diffusion current density. So of course I can do one thing. I can at least write the equation, right? I can at least write the equation Jp diff that we have seen, right? And what was the equation? Minus q dp dp by dx. So this is the equation that I have. Now can you guys please help me in actually determining? I just want you to relate two things. I want you to relate these two curves that I have drawn over here. So this is the first curve, this is the second curve, and this is the equation that I have, right? And the value of current density is given as positive 20 ampere per centimeter square. Now, can anybody please tell me if this JP diff is actually positive? If it is positive, then what will be the sign of this dp by dx? What will be the sign? Positive, positive or negative? Can you tell me? See, this is positive. There already exists a negative sign over here. Negative, right? So if this is negative, then this negative negative will cancel, and then I will be getting the positive diffusion current density, right? So if dp by dx is negative, that means the curve 1 cannot be true, right? The curve 1 cannot be true, and the concentration has to decrease like this, right? So now one sanity check that we will do when we will get our answer is the concentration at x equal to 0 and concentration at x equal to 0.01 centimeter, right? So the concentration at x equal to 0 should be greater than the concentration at x equal to 0.01 centimeter. So we will do this sanity check and we will confirm our answer as well, right? So now we will use this equation, and first of all we have to see what we have to find, right? So this concentration x equal to 0, it has been given to me as 4 into 10 to the power 17, and this concentration is the thing that they are actually asking to me, right? So we have to find out this concentration. So now we will see how we can find it. So this stuff is known, jp diff is known, q is known, dp is known. So from here I can actually get the value of dp by dx, right? So instead of following that, I will do one thing. I also know the equation of this curve, right? How will this curve look like? So this p of x will look something like mx plus c, where m will be negative, correct? It will look something like this. So now I will do one thing. I will try to find out the slope from here. I will try to find out the slope from here. So now what will be the slope? The slope will be nothing but p of x at 0 minus p of x at 0.01 centimeter divided by 0 minus 0.01 centimeter, correct? This will be the slope. So now if I just assume that this p of x equal to 0 and this concentration difference at x equal to 0 and at x equal to 0.01 centimeter, it is delta p. If it is delta p, then this slope will become minus 100 times delta p, and slope should actually come negative, right? Because this is the decreasing slope. If you just take the derivative, you will get the negative over here, right? So I got the value of dp by dx from so this is the m. Now if you look at this equation, let me just highlight it by equation number A. So now differentiate A with respect to x. Now why I am doing that? Because I need this dp by dx and I have a p of x with me, right? So dp of x by dx, if I do, then I will just get the value of m. By the way, if I just remove this negative sign, so if I just write it as positive, and I will consider that m itself is a negative. M itself is a negative, right? So m is a negative number. So you are seeing mx plus c, but m is a negative number. Just note that. So dp of x by dx actually came out to be m, and this m value is actually minus 100 times delta p, right? So now I know the dp of x by dx value, and this is the variable that I have. So now if I just write this as equation number B, and if I just write the value of dp of x by dx as equation number C, then I can actually solve both of them. I can actually substitute equation number C in equation number B, because apart from dp by dx, everything is known in equation number B. So at least I will be able to find out the value of delta P from there. And what is the value of delta P? P of x at 0 and P of x at 0.01 centimeter. I already know the value of P of x equal to 0. So from there I can easily calculate the value of P of x equal to 0.01 centimeter. So, and that is how we are going to solve this question. So now let me just write it. Yeah. Substitute C in B, right? If I substitute C in B, then I will be left with the following equation. Let me just see. So what, okay, Jp of diff is equal to minus Q dP minus 100 times delta P. So this became what? 100 times Q dP delta P, right? So now if I just took this delta P at some other on the right hand, on maybe left hand side, so this delta P will become something like Jp diff upon 100 Q times dP, right? So now this is the value of delta P that you will be seeing over here. And if you, so this Jp diff is already 20 amperes per centimeter square, right? This 100 into Q is nothing but 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19. What is the value of dP, by the way? dP they have given as 10. So now if you calculate the value of delta P, you will see that you will be getting around 1.25 into 10 to the power 17 per centimeter cube, right? So now what is the delta P? P of x equal to 0 minus P at x equal to 0.01 centimeter. So this is the value that I got, 1.25 into 10 to the power 17. So P at x equal to 0.01 centimeter, which is the question they are asking. So this will become P of x, P at x equal to 0. And what is this value? 4 into 10 to the power 17. So this is the value that I have. So 4 into 10 to the power 17 minus 1.25 into 10 to the power 17, right? So this will be the number that you will be getting. So this number will be around what? 2.75. 2.75 into 10 to the power 17 per centimeter cube. So this is the concentration of the holes at x equal to 0.01 centimeter. And I told you that we will do one sanity check at the end. And what was that sanity check? The concentration should be lesser compared to the value of P of x equal to 0. And that is this 4 into 10 to the power 17. So you can see that this concentration is indeed lower compared to the value of the concentration at x equal to 0. So this answer is actually making a logical sense, right? So I hope this question was very much clear. If you guys have any doubts, please feel free to poke me at any point. So we will be moving on to the next question now. So this is taken from the unsolved, that is the exercise problem of the Donald Niemann. So let's look what they are asking. In a n-type silicon, the Fermi energy level varies linearly. By the way, this Fermi energy level, this is EFI, okay? This is EFI. It varies linearly with distance over a short range. At x equal to 0, EF minus EFI is 0.4 electron volt, and at x equal to minus 10, x equal to 10 to the power minus 3 centimeter, EF minus EFI has decreased to 0.15 electron volt. So the first question they are asking me is write the expression for the electron concentration over the distance. Okay, so first of all, we will just draw the energy band diagram to just make the sense of what is actually happening, right? So EF minus EFI, right? So now since they have given me that the Fermi energy level, it is actually varying with the distance. It is actually varying. So you know the what you can say, the nature of EC, EV and EFI, all three are exactly same, right? So that means if EC is linearly increasing with distance, EV should also increase, EFI should also increase. And why this is the case? If one of them is actually moving in the opposite direction, or it is not following the nature, then the band gap will actually change with the distance, right? And that is not true unless and until you mix some semiconductor materials. So across the silicon at a particular room temperature, the band gap Eg should remain constant, right? So the nature of the increase or decrease for the EC, EV and EFI should be constant. So if I let me just increase the EFI as of now. So if let's say I am drawing EC over here, so let's say EC is moving like this, right? EC is moving like this, EFI is also moving like this, and along with that EV is also moving like this, right? So now what about the Fermi then? So now this is my x equal to 0, correct? And let's say this point that you are seeing over here, it is my x equal to 10 to the power minus 3. correct? So now what they have given me, that the Fermi, the difference between EF and EFI is actually decreasing as I move to the right side. So now EF, I have to draw something like this. Just a minute, sorry for my bad drawing. Yeah. So now this distance, this was the distance, it was around 0.4 electron volts. And now this delta that you are seeing over here, it is just around 0.15 electron volt. So now this is how the energy band diagram is looking now. EF is constant, the semiconductor is in the it is in the equilibrium. EFI, EC, EV are actually there is a band bending. So if there is any slope, between the EC, in the EC and nature of the EV, so that means there exists an electric field, correct? So now the first question is, write the expression for the electron concentration over the distance. Okay, so I have been given the energy band diagram. So they have not given, but actually I have drawn over here from whatever data they have given. So now based on this, I have to calculate the concentration of electron. Just like this EFI is actually varying with the distance, I have to calculate the concentration of electrons. So now I have to first of all use the formula which relates the relation of this EFI with the concentration of electrons, correct? So now is there any formula which will help me in writing EF minus EFI with respect to N naught? Of course there exists a formula, we have used it a lot. So what is the formula? N is equal to Ni exponential of EF minus EFI by KT. So this is the formula that I know, and since EF minus EFI is actually decreasing with the distance, right, then I expect that even the concentration of electrons should actually decrease as I move from the left side to the right side of the semiconductor slab, correct? So first of all, how will I solve the question? I have to write EF minus EFI as a function of distance. I have to get it, and how is it varying? So at x equal to 0, I know this value is around what? This value is around 0.4 electron volt. And at x equal to 10 to the power minus 3, this value has decreased to 0.15 electron volt. So I know that EF minus EFI actually decreases with the distance. So how can I write it? EF minus EFI, if I write it something like, it will look something like this, right? It will decrease linearly because EF is constant, EFI is increasing with the linear slope. So if I subtract a increasing slope with the constant, right, then I will get a line like this. It will become a negative slope. So now I will write it something like mx plus c. The first job is to find out the value of m, and the second job is to find out the value of c. Unless and until I know this, I cannot put this equation over here, and I cannot calculate the concentration of electrons with respect to distance, right? So I hope you got this till I hope till this point everything is clear to you. Now let's start solving for the slope and all, right? So first I will use these two data points, right? So for x equal to 0, so just for the ease, actually I will just write this as a delta E. It will make my job easier. Delta E as a function of x, okay? So delta E of 0 is equal to c, correct? So now what is the energy difference at x equal to 0? At x equal to 0, the energy difference between the Fermi and the intrinsic Fermi is 0.4 electron volt. So this c is nothing but 0.4 electron volts, correct? So this is the first thing that I was able to find. Now for x equal to 10 to the power minus 3, I have to, what is the value of delta E? So at x equal to 10 to the power minus 3, delta is around 0.15 electron volt, correct? So 0.15 electron volts will be equal to m into 10 to the power minus 3, because I am substituting x equal to 10 to the minus 3, plus the value of c. Value of c is 0.4 electron volts, correct? So now I will just use this equation and just try to find out the value of m. So value of m will be what? M will be 0.15 minus 0.4 electron volt divided by 10 to the power minus 3, correct? So now so by the way, what is this unit? This is centimeters, and this is electron volts on the top. So the unit of m will be electron volt per centimeter, correct? So now if you just solve this value, of m, correct? So this I have a space over here, I will just write it over here. So the value of m will come out to be around minus 250 electron volt per centimeter. So the first thing that I was able to get is that I mathematically modeled EF minus EFI as a function of the distance, and since I was able to model this as a function of distance, now I can also model the electron concentration as a function of distance, which is the question that they are asking me, right? So now let me write this delta E equation completely now. So this delta E was nothing but mx, m was minus 250, correct, x, plus value of c was nothing but zero point 0.4 electron volts. I will just write the units over here. So this is electron volt per centimeter, correct? So this is the value of delta E that I got. So now what I have to do, I have to substitute this equation and I have to put it where? I have to put it in this equation. So let me highlight it as equation number A. Let me highlight this as equation number B, correct? So now from A and B, what will be the value of n? N will be Ni times exponential of EF minus EI. So this is nothing but your EF minus EI, correct? Minus 250x plus 0.4 by kT, correct? So the kT, this is at operating at a room temperature. We are operating at a room temperature, even though they have not mentioned. Since they have not mentioned, that means T is always equal to 300 Kelvin. T is always equal to 300 Kelvin. And at that particular point, this will be 25.9 milli electron volt. The value of kT I'm talking about, correct? So now if you just do this, this is also in electron volt, this is in electron volt per centimeter, correct? So now if you just do some calculation over here, right? So now this expression will look something like Ni times exponential of minus 9650 times x plus 15.44, correct? So I was able to get the equation where I modeled the concentration of what you can say the electrons with respect to the distance, right? And you can see it. Just a minute, somebody wants to join. Yeah. So now I was able to model it. So this was the answer for part number A, correct? So now after that they are asking if the electron diffusion coefficient Dn is 25 centimeter square per second, calculate the electron diffusion current density at x equal to 0 and at x equal to 5 into 10 to the power minus 4. Okay, so first of all what we found, so if there is a energy, if there is a slope in the energy band diagram, the linear slope got transferred into the exponential when I try to find the concentration of electron with respect to distance. Now since this electron concentration is actually exponentially decaying, you can see over here, right? This is an exponential decay, this is exponential, this is E, correct? So since the electron concentration is now exponentially decaying, correct? So what can I say over here? So because of this this is not time, this is distance. Because of the exponential what you can say the exponential concentration, the concentration gradient that you're seeing over here, because of the concentration gradient I will have the diffusion current density, and this is the exact thing that they are asking me to find. Calculate the diffusion current density at 2 points, x equal to 0 and x equal to 5 into 10 to the power minus 4, correct? Now one question to you guys. So now I'm asking a very simple question. So what do you think the diffusion current density, whether it will be a function of x or it won't be a function of x? So let me just write J diff, right? Whether it will be a function of x or it should remain constant. What do you think, guys? Okay, great. So the guy answered that it will be of f of x. It will be a function. Now, why did he say that? See, now this j diff is directly proportional to what? dn by dx. Correct? This is not a linear function. It is an exponential function. Right? So if I just consider e of minus ax, right? Let's say this is f of x. So now if I try to take the derivative of this f dash of x, it will be what? Minus a into e to the power minus ax. You can see that the even the diffusion current density is actually having, it is not constant, it is becoming a function of x. And you can clearly see over here, at each and every point, if you try to take, if you at any point, if you try to draw a tangent, if you try to draw a tangent, you will see that the slope of the tangent also changes with respect to the distance. If the slope of the tangent does not remain same and it changes with the distance, that means that this dn, this j diff that you are seeing over here, it is actually changing, it is not remaining constant with the distance, right? So this is the first intuition that we got, and even this mathematical analysis is suggesting the same, correct? So now we will directly try to solve the equation. So let me just substitute the values. So this j diff is nothing but what, q times dn into dn by dx, correct? So now let me just put it, j diff will be q into dn into, so I will just use this equation for this dn by dx. So ni into exponential of minus 9650x plus 15.44 into the derivative of this bracket, right? So what is the derivative of this bracket? Minus 9650, right? So now let's calculate this. Let me just give me a 1 minute, guys. Yeah. So now we have to solve this, right? So we have been asked to solve this equation for 2 points. One is at x equal to 0. So let me substitute it. The answer for the part number 2 of this question, and in that 2, the first part will be x equal to 0. Correct? So now when I substitute x equal to 0, so the j diff will look something like q dn ni, q dn times ni into this minus 9650 is there, correct, into this exponential, this term that you are seeing over here, this will become 0. So I will be just left with exponential of 15.44. So if I substitute all the values, 1.6 into 10 power minus 19 into what is the concept, ni and all, okay, they have not given, this is the silicon. So since this is a silicon at room temperature, it will be 1.5 into 10 to the power 10. What is the value of dn that they have given? So dn is given as 25. So this is 25. I already have minus 9650 with me into exponential of 15.44. Correct? So if you just calculate this value, then this j diff that you are seeing over here, I will just write like x equal to 0. So this value you will be getting around, just a minute, minus 2938.9 ampere per centimeter square. Correct? So this is the first answer that we got. Let me write it as equation number C maybe. Correct? So for 2.2, where they are asking me to calculate this for x equal to 5 into 10 to the power minus 4 centimeter. So this is nothing but 5 micrometers. Okay. So again, if I do the same thing and if I substitute all the values, so what I will get, j diff is nothing but this q is nothing but 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19, dn is 25, the ni is nothing but 1.5 into 10 to the power 10. So now if I just use this term over here, I will use this term, right? So now this exponent into exponential of minus 9650, right? Minus 9650 into this will be, x will be what, 5 into 10 to the power minus 4, and this is what, 15.44 electron, 15.44, and this is electron volts. See this entire bracket that you are seeing over here, it is electron volts, right? So this is, wait just a minute. See, I already had this term over here. So this electron volt and electron volts, they actually got cancelled. So you don't have to worry about the unit conversion over here. Correct? So now if you solve this, then the j diff that you are seeing over here at x equal to 5 micrometer, so this answer will actually come out to be around minus 23.589 into ampere per centimeter square. Just a minute, there is also a multiplication factor of 10. So if I just write it again, then this will be like minus 235.89 ampere per centimeter square. So these are the two answers that I have. Minus 2938.9 and this is minus 235.89. Now one sanity check that we can do. See, I always like to do a sanity check because it at least gives me a confidence that my answers are correct. So since this is decaying exponentially, this n of x, if you plot it with respect to x, actually it is decaying exponentially, correct? So just a simple question to you guys. This is point number A, this is point number B. Can anybody please tell me, if I just draw a tangent over here, if I just draw a tangent at point number A and point number B, for which of these point the slope of the tangent will be lower? Point number A or point number B? A point number B, right? Just if I draw a tangent, then it will look something like this. If I draw a tangent over here, it has a decreasing slope, correct? And you always know that this J diff is directly proportional to dn by dx. So that means it is proportional to the slope of the tangent. If at a lower distance the slope of the tangent was more, then the magnitude of J diffusion will be higher. If at x equal to 5 micrometer, if the slope of the tangent is lower, that means the J diff value should be lower, correct? So that is what you are seeing. Ignore the sign for now because both of them are negative. But if you just look at the magnitude, this is very close to what you can say, this is very close to 0 over here, and this is having some finite good value, correct? So this is having some finite value. So that means as x is increasing, the magnitude of J diffusion should fall. It should fall, and this is what you are seeing over here. I'm just drawing an arrow. As I increased my x from x equal to 0 to x equal to 5 micrometer, the magnitude of the J diffusion actually decreased from 2938 to 235. So this is how I like to do the sanity check, and I hope the answer for this question is clear. By the way, this question was really big because it was taken from the unsolved exercise of the Donald Niven, and this star that you are seeing over here, the star behind the question number, this actually denotes a difficult question, correct? So if you are a very adventurous and you like to solve a very thrilling question, so I would highly recommend to solve such type of questions which are there in the Donald Niemann. So you can see how much analysis went into this stuff just to get our correct answers, right? So I hope this is very much clear to you. So what we will do now, guys, we will just take a small break for 5 minutes. We will be back by 8 p.m. sharp. So the break starts now. Yep, I guess we are good to go. Yep, from the current slides, this it will be better if I turn on my pen. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we will resume the session. So this is a problem number 3. Again, you can see it has been taken from the unsolved exercise of the Donald Niemann. Because of the lack of time, I won't be solving this question completely. I will just give you the steps because the real difficult part is with the question number B and not with the question number 1. So if you just follow the steps from the previous question, what they are asking is derive the expression for the electron diffusion current density versus the distance over the given region. Now they have made our job easier. For in the previous question, we had to derive this profile, this n of x, from the energy band diagram, but they have given it directly over here, correct? So you don't have to do a lot of stuff. If you just follow the previous process, then you will get the expression for this J diff, right? So I will just write the expression over here. You can verify your answers. So the J diff expression that you will be getting is minus 124,320 exponential of minus x upon 10 to the power minus 5 amperes per centimeter square, correct? So this is the value of J diff that you will be getting, and again, as explained by the guy in the previous question, so the J diff should also vary with the distance because the slope of the exponential at different point is different, correct? Now the next question, I promised you that we will have a numerical where we will see where we will just check at what magnitude of the electric field the diffusion actually stops. So this is a question that actually takes that problem into account. Determine the induced electric field that generates a drift current density that compensates the diffusion current density. So what it is telling you, that I have a semiconductor slab, so it is telling me, it is actually asking me to calculate, hey, I know that electrons will actually move from the right side to the left side because of the concentration gradient. I want you to calculate the magnitude of that electric field when the diffusion actually stops. So now when the semiconductor, okay, where is my marker? Yeah. So for the case when semiconductor is in equilibrium, right, there will not be any net current that will be flowing through the semiconductor. So J total should be 0. J total consists of what? Diffusion current density plus drift current density. Correct? What is the expression for drift current density? Qn mu n times C plus what is the expression for the diffusion current density? So Q dn by dx. If I make this equal to 0, and sir must have done it in one of the lectures because I have a screenshot over here. So he must have done it something like this. So he must have used this equation, and then from here he must have calculated this. Correct? So the expression for this E that you are seeing over here, the expression for E that you will be getting is around minus kt by q into 1 upon n of x into dn of x by dx. So this is the magnitude of the electric field when the, just a minute, yeah. So this is the magnitude of the electric field when the diffusion process actually stops, correct? And since we don't have a lot of time, what I will do is I will just write down the answer for this question. So I will just write the expression once again. E is minus kt by q 1 upon n of x into dn of x by dx. So that n of x profile has been given to you, right? So you can differentiate it easily. You can substitute n of x. The kt by q value you already know, correct? So the answer for this question that you will see is the E will come out to be around 2590 volts per centimeter. So this is the answer of E that you will be getting, correct? So I hope this question is very much clear. And if you ask me why there is no negative sign, because this negative sign got cancelled with the negative sign that will come after the differentiation. So if you look over here, there is already a negative sign over here, correct? If you differentiate, this negative sign will come outside, and that sign and this negative sign will get cancelled with respect to each other. So this is the answer that you will be getting. This is the exact field where the diffusion will actually stop and no further diffusion will actually occur, and this concentration gradient will remain as it is. Correct? So I hope this question is very much clear to you. Now we will move on to the next concept of the carrier generation and recombination. So now again what we said, okay, for the case when the semiconductor was in equilibrium, we don't have to do all this because the generation rate was always equal to recombination rate. And now why generation and recombination rates are equal? If these two rates, if the generation rate is not equal to recombination rate, then what will happen? The concentration of electrons, of concentrations of carrier will either increase with time or it will decrease with time, correct? And that is not true, and that cannot happen in the equilibrium. So now what have we done? We have actually shined the light on the semiconductor, and because of shining of the light, what happened? They excited the electrons that are present in the valence band. It gave them enough energy to jump into the conduction band and start participating in the conduction. And when the electron moves from the valence band to conduction band, it leaves behind a hole, right? And that is also free to conduct. So that is why you will see it has been written in the textbook that delta n is equal to delta p. So excess carriers, they are generated always in equal numbers when you shine the light, because one electron which actually moved from the valence band to conduction band, it also created one hole, correct? So I hope this point is very much clear to you. The opposite process is what? So the moment you try to turn off this light, if you stop shining the light on the semiconductor, then the electrons which actually moved to the conduction band because they were excited, now they will start falling back into the valence band, correct? And they will start recombining with the holes that are present over there, correct? So this was the basic concept of the carrier generation and recombination. Now we also saw something like minority carrier diffusion equation, right? Correct? I don't remember whether sir included this term in the while writing that equation or not, but this was there in the Donald-Niemann. But you just have to ignore this term if there is no field that actually exists. So when you just shine a light on the semiconductor and you are not applying any external electric field to the semiconductor slab, this term will always be equal to 0 and you don't have to worry about this term, correct? So now since we will be solving few questions ahead, so what I have done over here, I have just written all the conditions in which case you have to make this term 0, correct? So sir must have told you this equation. Now, the distance dependent variation of these minority carriers, correct? The distance dependent variation of these minority carriers, when can it be zero? If I have a semiconductor slab and if I'm shining the light from all the sides, and if I'm shining the light from all the sides, and this length that you're seeing and this width that you're seeing, I'm assuming that this L and W are very very small compared to the absorption distance. What is this absorption distance? That means photons can actually easily go from this point to this point without experiencing a drop in the intensity, correct? So what does this mean? This photon actually incident from here, it has the capability to excite the electron at the opposite edge over here, correct? So if I illuminate the semiconductor uniformly, what does this means? The carriers will be generated throughout the semiconductor. If the carriers are generated throughout the semiconductor, that means there will not be any distance dependent variation, because the carriers are generating everywhere in the semiconductor material. So at this point, this zero, for the uniform illumination, you have to make this term zero, correct? Now the next term, that is with respect to T, correct? Now when the semiconductor reaches the new equilibrium state, what do I mean by that? So if this is a semiconductor material, what you did now, after a certain time you shine the light from this side, correct? So now, and if you wait for long enough time, then you will reach a new state. Of course, light is still shining over here, but the whatever changes were supposed to happen in this material, they have already happened. Enough number of minority carriers have been generated, correct? So now if you read this word steady state condition in the numericals, then you know that there cannot be any transient. See, you must have studied in the electrical network subject that the, just a minute, you must have studied in the electrical network subject. So if I give you the RC circuit, right? If I just give you the RC circuit and if I apply a step input over here or something like that, then you must have seen in the books, right? Calculate the steady state voltage at this point, right? So first, doing the steady state voltage, what you do, you substitute T is equal to infinite in the transient equations, right? So similarly, you have to wait till the infinite period. Actually, the infinite period is not required, but by putting T is equal to infinity, we solve the numericals like that, correct? So for steady state condition, there will not be any variation in this delta. So at the steady state, you have to make this term zero, correct? So I hope this is very much clear to you. We will be ignoring this term because in the questions that we are solving, the semiconductor material is not it is not going through any external electric field, correct? So I hope this is very much clear. And these are the cases that sir must have covered, right? So the case one is nothing but the steady state and uniform generation. So what did I tell you? For uniform generation, you have to make this term zero for uniform generation. For the steady state, you have to make the term which is actually having a variation with the time, that you have to make zero. So for the case when the semiconductor has reached the semiconductor slab has reached the steady state and the semiconductor material has been illuminated uniformly, so you will be left with only these two terms, correct? And in that particular case, the concentration of the minority carriers becomes nothing but the generation rate times the lifetime of the carriers, right? So this is the first case that we have seen, and that's why you can see the dou p versus x distance is completely constant, correct? Now the next case is also of the steady state and the long sample, right? So for the steady state, that this dou t term will be completely zero, right? And now what they are seeing, see, we are shining the light from only this particular side, only at the edge of the semiconductor. So within this material, there is no generation that is actually happening, correct? So now that's why this Gp has to be zero. And in this particular case, sir must have told you that this B reduces to zero and you are left with only this equation. You are left with only this equation. So what this equation actually suggests, so carriers will be generated. So the maximum number of carriers, this is an exponential decay. So this maximum of delta P that you are seeing over here, it will occur when x equal to 0, correct? And the value will be nothing but just A. That is a constant that sir has written over here. So there will be an exponential decrease like this. So there will be an exponential decay in the concentration of the minority carriers that are actually generated. And if you see, then it actually makes sense, right? They should decay as the distance is increasing, because many of these carriers will actually recombine as they go ahead into the semiconductor slab, correct? And now just to give you an analogy why this term that you are seeing, it came out to be an exponential decay. You must have studied something called as the radioactive decay in the chemistry of 11th and 12th standard. Have you heard about this concept, radioactive decay? You must have studied it during your CET or JEE preparation time. Guys, have you heard about this radioactive decay concept in the chemistry, from the chemistry in the 11th or 12th standard? Hello? Guys, are you able to hear me? Uh, Hello, guys, are you able to hear me? Okay. Were you able to see my slides, or my slides were invisible? Because I just got a message that my screens actually got stopped sharing. So are you able to see my screen now, or it is still not visible? Just a minute. Let me just turn on my PPT. Just a minute. My screen is visible or no? It's visible. Okay. So were you able to see this slide? Like, were you able to hear whatever I said for this particular slide regarding the radioactive decay and all? Okay, great. So you were able to hear it. So you must have studied the concept of this radioactive decay, where you must have written some decay equations for the particular for the particular what you can say elements in the periodic table, and you must have seen how they decay, and you must have studied this, that dnp by dt or dnp by dx, like they decay exponentially with respect to time, because this decay is directly proportional to the number of what the concentration, not number, the concentration, correct? So the similar concept that you can apply over here, and you can see why these carriers are actually decaying exponentially. Not only that, but if you even look at the, if you take a particular area where there is a population residing, let's say 1 lakh people are residing over here, and if you look at this area where there only 10,000 people are residing, so you can see that after maybe 10 or 15 years, if you observe the population in this particular area and this particular area, you will see that the population of this area has increased by a lot compared to this area, right? So the concentration is directly proportional to the number of people available in this area. So similarly, you can see why this exponential function appeared over here for this particular case, that is for the semiconductor where you are shining the light, for the radioactive decay, as well as the areas where considering a particular population. So you will see that this exponential function occurs a lot in the nature. Okay. So now this was the case of the third, where we are considering the transient with no generation and no special variation, correct? So if you are so what is it, what is this case exactly? So we were shining the light till time t equal to 0. At time t equal to 0, we suddenly turned off the light, and now after that we wanted to know how the concentration is actually varying with the time, correct? So now for time t less than equal to 0, since the light was turned on for the infinite period of time, we already saw that for the case of the uniform generation and steady state, so the concentration of the minority carriers will be written with this formula. Now since we turned off the light for t just equal to 0, we have to write the, we have to go through this equation, correct? Since there is no generation at all, so this gp will be 0, and this, what you can say, the distance variation of this term, this will be 0, because we are illuminating the, we were illuminating the sample throughout. So now you will be just left with these two terms, just these two terms, correct? And if you solve again, you are getting the exponential decay function, correct? So instead of remembering the formulas, if you just remember this one equation, and if you know at what particular case you have to make certain terms 0, then you don't have to remember all these cases. Okay. So now we will solve a problem now which appeared in the GATE 2021. So just give me a second, guys. So the problem number 4 is asking a bar of silicon is actually doped with the boron concentration. So the boron is nothing but the acceptor impurity for the silicon, and it is assumed to be fully ionized. It is exposed to light such that electron hole pairs are generated throughout the volume of the bar at the rate. So this GL has also been given to me. Generation rate is nothing but 10 to the power 20. If the recombination lifetime is 100 microsecond and intrinsic carrier concentration of silicon is 10 to the power 10, and assuming a 100% ionization of the boron, then the approximate product of the steady state electron and hole concentration due to this light exposure is. So they are asking us to calculate the value of n into p. So just a simple question to you guys: should this n into p will be equal to ni square for this particular case? Will it be equal to ni square? Okay, somebody just said yes. So can anybody please tell me this law of mass action, when does it become invalid? Is it true for all the cases?
Sir, they are light exposure, so mass action.
Exactly, very good. So now what this guy just said is that this law of mass action, right? So if I just simplify, then this is only valid when the semiconductor material is in actual equilibrium, right? There is no external stimulus and all, and the moment you are including the light, right, you are shining the light, correct, and there is a generation of excess minority carriers, correct. So in those particular cases this law of mass action does not hold true. So just be very careful with that. And the if I just want to give you an intuition for that, then just remember, why did we even introduce the concepts of quasi Fermi levels? There was no need to introduce the concept of quasi Fermi levels if this law of mass action was holding true for all the cases, right? So now this is not true for this question, right? And you must be seeing that np is equal to ni square. This option will definitely be there in the option just to fool you. So if I just do ni square, right, so what will be the ni square? Ni square is nothing but 10 to the power 20. You can clearly see 10 to the power 20 is there in the answer, but this is the incorrect answer, correct? So now we will see how to solve this question, correct? So just give me a second. Yep. So what we have to do first, so first of all, n into p is nothing but this n naught is the equilibrium concentration into delta n is nothing but this is the carrier concentration generated because of that because we are shining the light. Similarly, p naught is the equilibrium concentration, and again the delta p, again it got generated because of the shining of light, correct? Now what has been given? So we have been given that just give me a second. It is exposed to light such that electrons and hole pairs are generated throughout. So this is the case for uniform illumination. This is the case for uniform illumination, and they are asking us the steady state electron and hole concentration. So this is also case for steady state. This is also case for steady state, right? So now if I just write this equation very quickly, the minority carrier diffusion equation. So this is what d delta np upon dt. Why delta np? So by the way, I will just write this notation. So this delta, this p that you are seeing over here, it is nothing but the p type material. Why p-type material? Because we have doped it with the boron, right? So the excess electron concentration generated inside the p-type material, this is denoted by delta np. I will just repeat it once again. Excess electron concentration delta n generated within the material which is of p-type is nothing but delta np, correct? So now this will be what? If I just write the equation, this is equal to dn dou square delta np by dou x square minus delta np by tau n plus gl. This was the equation, correct? But for the uniform illumination case, this is 0. For the steady state, even this is 0. So what did we get? So we got delta n is equal to delta p is equal to what? Gl times tau n, correct? So this is what we got. And why they are generated in equal numbers? They are generated in equal numbers because the moment a photon hits an electron in the valence band, it excites it, correct? It leaves behind a hole when it goes to the conduction band. So that's why they are being generated in the equal number. So we just have to calculate this value first, right? So the GL has been given as 10 to the power 20. The carrier lifetime, right? So it has been given as 100 microseconds. You can see over here in the question, 100 microsecond is given. 100 into 10 to the power minus 6, correct? So this concentration, it came out to be around what? 10 to the power 16. Just let me check. This is 10 to the power 16 per centimeter cube, correct? So now let's start substituting the values, right? So the Na was around 10 to the power 16. Just a minute. Yeah, so let's start substituting the values. Okay, just a minute. I don't have a space anymore over here. Let me just introduce a quick slide. Yeah, so home, new slide. Yeah, that will do the job. Yeah, great. Yeah, so slideshow from the current slide. Yeah. Let me turn on my pen. Correct. So now let me just substitute the values quickly. So the product of n into p will be nothing but, so first of all we have to calculate the value of n naught as well, correct? So n naught into p naught will be ni square, correct? Because this is for the equilibrium. So p naught has been given as 10 to the power 16, ni square is 10 to the power 20, this and this is n naught. So n naught came to be around 10 to the power 4 per centimeter cube. So n into p, so n naught plus delta n, right? So n naught is 10 to the power 4. Delta n value we just calculated, it is 10 to the power 16. 10 to the power 16. Similarly, p naught plus delta p. So p naught is 10 to the power 16, even the delta p is 10 to the power 16. Correct? I can ignore this term with respect to 10 to the power 16. So this will be coming out to be what? 2 into 10 to the power 32. Correct? So this is the term that will be coming, and we have per centimeter cube square. So this will become what? 2 into 10 to the power 32 centimeter to the power minus 6. So this is the answer that you will be getting. Correct? So be extremely careful whenever you are applying the law of mass action. Always ask yourself whether the semiconductor is in the equilibrium or not. If there is any other process where we are applying the shining the light or doing something else, then do not apply this. Only for the case where you are having the equilibrium concentration, wherever you are trying to find the equilibrium concentration of the electron or holes, only then apply this law, correct? So this 2 into 10 to the power 32, so this is the correct answer. So now let's look at the these cases, right? The turning off the light source, and the next case will be turning on the light source. So the difference between these two cases is just that the moment when the light was continuously shined on the semiconductor for infinite time, and after that the light was turned off. So you expect that the concentration of the excess minority carriers, it will just decay down with respect to time. Correct? This is a case of the exponential decay. But what happens in the opposite case? So what does this mean? So the semiconductor slab was kept like this for infinite period of time, and at t equal to 0, you started shining this semiconductor material uniformly throughout by turning on the light source. So now in that particular case, just like when you turned off the light, the cause because of which the excess minority carriers were created, after removing the cause, the excess minority carriers has to decay, right? Since you are introducing the cause now at t equal to 0, the cause means the light source over here, correct? Since you are turning on the light source, the concentration of the excess minority carrier should increase now, correct? And just like just like you had the RC circuits, and you have these equations of the exponential decay, you must have also seen how the RC circuit charges. It charges with 1 minus exponential, it discharges with exponential, correct? Similarly, if you look over here, what you are seeing, this is from the Donald Niemann. So you can go to this chapter number 6 and you can look into this equation in depth. So you can see the way the exponential carriers are actually increasing with respect to time. So they are actually increasing with 1 minus exponential. It is exactly like the charging of the RC circuits. And if I put t is equal to infinity over there, then this term will become 0, and you will be just left with g into tau. and this is nothing but the case which we have seen, right? This is the steady state concentration of the excess minority carriers, right? So just be familiar with this all these things, because if you try to solve the unsolved examples of the Donald Niemann, in some of the cases the light may be turned on at a particular time, and after that they may turn off the light at a particular time. I have also seen the questions where the light was turned on for, let's say, t is equal to 1 microsecond, then for 5 microseconds, uh, let's say I have just lighting light on, then at t is equal to 5 microseconds light was turned off, and again at t is equal to 10 microseconds they turn back the light. So you have to be extremely familiar with what you are doing, right? So the examples that I'm solving, they are just very simple one. If you want a real challenging questions, then you have to solve the unsolved examples of the Donald Niemann. You remember the second problem that we solved, right? It took so long time. I guess it took almost half an hour. So just be familiar, and just be familiar that this type of questions are actually existing if you open the Donald Niemann's book. That is the unsolved exercise. So now we will again solve one more gate problem, again an interesting one. So let's look at the problem number 5. As shown in figure 7, a uniformly doped silicon bar of length L equal to 0.1 micrometer has a donor concentration, correct, and is illuminated at x equal to 0. So it is not illuminated throughout, okay, such that the electron and hole pairs are generated at the rate. So the rate at which the electron and holes were generated, now that rate itself is varying with respect to distance. This was not happening before. We have been given the GL to be constant in the previous questions, but GL itself is now varying with distance. We will see if we have to do some extra thing to solve this question or not, correct? And the value of GL naught has been given over here. The whole lifetime has been given, correct? So the whole lifetime, the holes are nothing but the minority carriers in the n-type silicon, correct? So we always consider the carrier lifetime of the hole over here because it is a minority. So electron charge has been given, the diffusion coefficient has also been given. So now what they are asking, assuming a linearly decaying steady state excess hole concentration. So what does this mean? So if I just plot from x equal to 0 to x equal to L, if I just plot the excess minority concentration, that is the holes, so they are asking me to assume a linear decay. So at x equal to L, it completely becomes 0, and at x equal to 0, I have the maximum concentration. Now they are asking the magnitude of the diffusion current density at x equal to L by 2, correct? So first of all, what is the diffusion current density? So if I just write Jp diff is what? Minus q dp of x by dx. Now this, what is this p of x? Now this p of x contains two things. This p of x also contains the equilibrium concentration, and it also contains the variation, that is the variation of the minority carrier concentration with respect to x. But since I am interested in dp of x by dx, this p naught that you are seeing, since it is a constant, this will become 0, correct? And what I will be getting is just what you can say, d by dx of delta p of x. And what is d by dx of this delta p of x? So this is the delta p of x that you are seeing over here. Now if I just take the derivative of this line, if I just take it, then it is nothing but the slope of this line, correct? So now this will be nothing but the slope that I will be getting. So the Jp diff that you are seeing over here, it will be nothing but minus q into dp into the slope of this line that I have. So if I find the slope of this line, then my job is completely done. Now the real challenge is to find the slope of this line itself, correct? So now what will be the slope? So delta p of x. So delta p of x, so how will I write it? So let's say I denote it with, so I know that it is decaying linearly. So this term will be there. So how did I write this term? So at x equal to 0, this negative term is completely vanished. At x equal to L, this negative term became 1. So the delta p of x has to become 0. But what will come at the outside? So at the outside, it will come like delta p of x equal to 0. So let me just write the equation once again. Delta p of x will be delta p of 0 into 1 minus x by L. We will verify this equation, don't worry. At x equal to 0, delta P of X will be what? So if I substitute over here, then delta P of X become delta P of 0. So this is correct. At x equal to L, the concentration should reduce completely to a value of 0. Correct? So at x equal to L, this term that you are seeing, this will become 0. So delta P of X becomes 0. Right? So now if I just try to get this d delta P of X by dx, which is nothing but the value of m, so this came out to be what? Minus delta P of 0 by L. So this is what I have. So now the J diff that you are seeing, the JP diff from the previous equations, this Q minus Q into dP into M, minus Q into dP into minus of delta P of 0 by L. So just a minute, somebody wants to join. Yeah, so this equation becomes something like this. So this will become what? Q into dP into delta P of 0 divided by L. So the entire equation now reduced down to finding out the value of these two terms, because everything else has been given to me. Correct? So how will I find the value of delta P of 0? So let me check whether I have been given anything or not. So to find out the value of delta P of 0, I have to do something, because nothing else has been given to me. So it is nothing but delta P of 0 is nothing but the my excess minority carrier concentration at x equal to 0. Correct? So this has been given to me, and what else has been given to me? So they are just asking to the steady state excess. Just a minute. Let me see if I have made any mistake. No, this is exactly correct. So now at delta P of 0, so I know that the excess minority carrier concentrations, right? So whatever excess minority carrier concentration I will be having at x equal to 0, so from here on it will start actually decaying. But here this will be completely maximum, and from the previous cases that we have seen over here, just a minute, let me just show you the few cases. Yeah, so when in the case of the transients, and when the concentration has reached the steady state and all, so we had seen that the concentration exactly, even if you try to look at this h, so this is nothing but GL times tau. Correct? So now at this particular age, the concentration of the excess minority carriers will be what? This will be GL into tau again, and from here on it will start to decay actually. Correct? So now from here on it will start to decay. So I have to first of all find the value of GL at x equal to 0. So let me just write it. So delta of P of 0 is nothing but GL into tau. And who are the minority carriers? So minority carriers are holes. So that's why tau P will come over here. Now GL at x equal to 0 is nothing but, if you look at this part, if you look at this equation, so at x equal to 0, GL is equal to GL naught. This is GL naught, right? So GL naught times tau P, and the value of GL naught has been given to me. Value of GL naught is 10 to the power 17, and what is the value of tau P? So the tau P is 10 to the power minus 4. So now it became like 10 to the power 13, and this is the value of delta P of 0. Correct? So we were able to find out the value of delta P of 0, like the concentration will be maximum, over here. And if you ask me the reason why I chose this as GL into tau P, so since the light is shining from this particular side, and if you wait for a long period of time, if you wait for a very long period of time, then whatever transient that I told you over here, that is this exponential charging and all, so it would have already reached its steady state value. Correct? So this exponential charging would have already reached its steady state value. And what is the steady state value from this equation? The steady state is nothing but GL times tau P. So that is the reason why I chose the value at this particular age as GL times tau P. I hope this doubt is clear now. So the delta P of 0 value I have, the length I already have, dP I already have, Q also I know. So now let's try to substitute everything. So this is JP diff. So JP diff will be nothing but 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 into what is the value of dP? dP is given as 100. 100 into delta P of 0 is 10 to the power 13 divided by the value of L. What is the value of L they have given? Just a minute. L is 0.1 micrometer. 0.1 into 10 to the power minus 4. By the way, we have to convert micrometer to centimeters, right? So that's why I have taken 10 to the power minus 4 over here, not 10 to the power minus 6. Correct? So if you just calculate this value, then this value that you're seeing, it will come out to be around, just a minute. So it will come out to be around 16 amperes per centimeter square. I hope this question was very much clear to you. If you guys have any doubts, then please feel free to poke me. We may just solve one or two questions more and then we will wrap up the session. So again, an interesting problem came in GATE 2016. So let's look at the problem. So consider a silicon sample at T equal to 300 Kelvin, shown in the figure. The dopant density has been given as 5 into 10 to the power 16. The sample is uniformly illuminated. The moment it is uniformly illuminated, you don't have the distance dependent variation of the minority carrier concentration, right? And the rate of the generation has also been given to me. Correct? The incident radiation is turned off at T equal to 0. Assume the condition of low level injections. Also the carrier lifetimes have been given to me. The whole concentration at T is equal to 0 and the whole concentration at T is equal to 0.3 microseconds. Correct? So now the one thing that we know after looking at several cases, that if there is a case of the uniform illumination and if you turn off the light at T equal to 0, if you turn off the light source at T equal to 0, then this is the equation that you have. Correct? You have the exponential decay and this is the equation that we will be using. So now let me just write this equation. So the equation will be what? Delta P of T will be delta P at T is equal to 0, correct, into exponential of minus T by tau P. Correct? Why tau P? Because holes are the minority carriers in the n-type material, because it has been given that the dopant concentration is 5 into 10 to the power 16. Correct? So now delta P of T is equal to 0, we have to find out, right? Delta P of T is equal to 0 has been not given to us, so we have to find out. And how are we going to find it out? So we have to use certain equations. And what are we going to use? Of course, our classical equations, G opt into tau P. Correct? So this is the equation for delta P at T equal to 0. And if you ask me why I am using that, because light has been turned off at T equal to 0. So the sample was in the steady state before turning off the light. So the exponential charging would have already reached the steady state. The same reason that I gave you in the previous question. Correct? So G opt is what? 1.5 into 10 to the power 20. What is the value of tau P? So the tau P has been given as 0.1 microseconds. 10 to the power minus 6. Correct? So now if I just calculate this value, then this value will be coming out to be around 1.5 into 10 to the power minus 13. Right? So this is the value of delta P at T equal to 0. Of course, per centimeter cube. So this is the first part that we got. Now for calculating the second part, we have to use this equation. Correct? So at T is equal to 0.3 microseconds. So delta P will be what? So this delta P at T equal to 0 into exponential of minus 0.3 microseconds divided by what is the value of tau P? Tau P is 0.1 microseconds. Correct? So this is what delta P at T equal to 0 into exponential of minus 3. Correct? So if you just solve this value, then this value will come out to be around 7.468 into 10 to the power 11 per centimeter. And now just to do the sanity check, we know that the concentration must have decayed as compared to time T equal to 0. So if I just go from this equation number A to equation number B, you can see that the concentration has actually reduced now. So it makes sense that, by the way, just a minute, this is not 10 to the power minus 13, this is 10 to the power plus 13. Because how the concentration can be so low, right? It has to be a reasonable number. So this cannot be 10 to the power minus 13. Correct? So from 10 to the power 13, we have actually reduced to 10 to the power 11. So it definitely makes sense that the concentration has reduced. Correct? So what is the correct answer? So this is the option that is actually matching our answers. I hope this is very much clear to you. So now this is a question for you guys. This question came in the GATE 2020. So now they have given a composite material where they have given the different doping concentration. So this is extremely dope, because you are seeing two plus signs, right? This is heavily dope, and these two that you are seeing over here, so they are normally dope. Now what they are asking us, so they are asking us to draw the energy band diagram for this particular material. So this is a combined thing, so it is not just a single semiconductor slab. Different slabs with different doping concentrations have been given to you, and then you have been asked to actually make a guess out of which of this energy band diagram is correct. Now the first thing that they have mentioned is equilibrium band diagram. Can anyone please tell me what happens to the Fermi level when the entire semiconductor material is in the equilibrium? Can there be any variation in the Fermi level throughout the semiconductor material at the equilibrium? Can there be any variation in the Fermi level? Guys, what happens to the Fermi level when the semiconductor is in the equilibrium? It remains constant, exactly. So EF remains constant. So no matter what, if I go from x equal to 0 to x equal to L, my Fermi level should not change at all, right? So now in the, let's say in the second option that you are seeing over here, the Fermi level that you are seeing, this is the Fermi level they have given. So if the Fermi level has to be constant, this option cannot be correct. If you look at the option number C, again there is a variation in the Fermi level. Again this option cannot be true, so this option has to be wrong. Now only two options are left for me. The point number A and the point number D. Correct? Now how can I differentiate between these two things, right? So if I just concentrate between this N and the N plus, this N and the N plus, so I will just ask you one thing. If ND, if ND or N naught, that is the electron concentration, the equilibrium electron concentration is actually increased, then what happens to the EC minus EF? Whether the Fermi level will be very close to the EC for heavy electron concentration or less electron concentration, what will happen? EC minus EF decreases as N naught is increased. Correct? Yes. So now we will use this principle and we will differentiate between them. So now I have N over here, I have N plus over here. So EC minus EF for this particular region has to be very low compared to this region. Now let's look at this D, option number D over here. EC minus EF. So this is the EC minus EF, and for this particular case this is the EC minus EF. You can see that this is actually larger, but our logic is giving the opposite answer. If you come over here, then you can see this distance is actually very small compared to this distance, and this matches with our analysis that as the semiconductor material is doped heavily, the distance EC minus EF should decrease, right? So the option number A is the correct answer, and just by using the two logics that the EF, the Fermi level should remain constant during the equilibrium, and as the electron concentration is increased, the EC minus EF has to decrease. So by using these two logics, we have removed all other three options, that is option number B, option number C and option number D. So the correct options that actually remained is option number A. I hope this question was very much clear to you, and just give me a second. So we may not have enough time to cover the next few slides, but I just want to give you the, what you can say, the intuition of the quasi Fermi levels, right? So now I guess one of the guy in between said NP is equal to Ni square may also remain valid even when we are shining the lights, right? So that is not true, because we have seen that N plus delta N into P plus delta P, correct? it is not equal to Ni square, right? Only this N naught and P naught that you are seeing, only their product N naught P naught will be equal to Ni square, correct? So now to deal with the semiconductor materials where the where they are under the where you are shining the light on the semiconductor and you still want to draw the Fermi levels, right? So now in those particular cases, actually, if you consider the case of the equilibrium, then what is actually happening? If you look at the case number 1 over here and case number 2, so we are not shining any light, we are not shining any light for these two particular cases. Now what this is showing you, that EF is very much closer to EV, and in the second case EV is very much closer to EC, right? So now what does it actually telling you? As EF is actually moving up, right, my material became more N type, and if I move from here to here, right, the N naught actually increases and P naught actually decreases, but their product N naught into P naught is equal to Ni square remain constant, right? Of course one has to decrease, right? So only in that particular case their product will remain constant. But for the case where I'm shining a light on the semiconductor, that is the case number 3, that does not matter, right? This I don't have to be responsible to hold this equation true, right? So what we decided, instead of moving the Fermi levels like this, like since this equation is not holding true, and you know the minority carrier concentration, that is, if you have a n-type material, then the concentration which will be affected most will be the concentration of holes, right? There will be a drastic change in the concentration of holes compared to the concentration of electrons. Just to give you an example, if let's say N is equal to 10 to the power 16, right, and if you consider, then let's say the concentration of holes is just 10 to the power 4, I'm assuming 10 to the power 20 is equal to Ni square, right? So this is the concentration of electron, this is the concentration of holes, and if I shine the light such that the excess carrier concentration, it became around 10 to the power 10. So now if you add 10 to the power 10 into 10 to the power 16, it is not a lot. But if you add 10 to the power 10 in 10 to the power 4, so the concentration, that is P naught plus delta P, it will become like 10 to the power 10. So there is a huge difference between this, correct? So now what we did, we decided to split the Fermi levels into the two, that is EFN and EFP, and now we will use this energy band diagram now to solve the questions related to the energy band diagrams, correct? And it is not necessary for this particular case where we are shining the light, there this delta N is equal to delta P, so this has to be equal. But you will see some cases where this need not hold true. The delta N may be greater than delta P, or delta P may be greater than delta N. As you will study the diodes and the BJTs, right, so you will see that these cases will actually occur. So I won't be explaining them in very much depth right now. So just be familiar why we are introducing the quasi Fermi levels and what is the even need to do that. So in some cases this may happen that EFN will move up, but EFN will move up, but EFP will remain constant. So the variation of this EFN, right, with respect to EFI, it may not be equal compared to the variation of EFP with respect to EFI. For the case of shining of light, the variation, this EFN and EFI and EFI, EFP, this variation has to be equal. But for the other cases, if you look into the BJT and diode, this may not hold true, correct? So now what is the practical relevance for introducing this quasi Fermi levels? So this will be the last slide for today. So what is the practical relevance? So can you just tell me a device which converts light energy into electrical energy, and it can also help you to run the appliances which are present in your home, maybe electric cooker, maybe your, what you can say, maybe your TV, maybe your washing machine. So just tell me the name of the device which actually converts the light energy into electrical energy. Do you know any such device? Solar cell, exactly, very good. Just a minute, where is my marker? Yeah. So solar cell, right? So you will see when we study the solar cells and all, right? So you are constantly, your semiconductor material, whatever it may be, it is constantly under the illumination. It is constantly under illumination, correct? So if you use the solar cell, or even if you consider the photodiode. So what is this photodiode or photo detector? So the photo detector is nothing but, you if you want to detect the changes in the intensity of the light, right? So you have to convert that information into electrical signal for any processing. So if you look into this material, so normally if you look at the photodiode, we generally use P, I and N diode. So this is the intrinsic silicon, this is the intrinsic silicon, this is the P type silicon, right? This is the N type silicon, this is the N type silicon. Now in this particular case, since the semiconductor material itself is not under the equilibrium, you just cannot have this what you can say, this single Fermi level, because we assume that the Fermi level is constant throughout the material only in the case of equilibrium. But when you are shining the light and doing all crazy kind of stuff, your semiconductor material is not in equilibrium. If your semiconductor material is not under equilibrium, then you have to use the quasi Fermi level concept. So you will see that when we analyze the photodiodes and all, we will use the quasi Fermi levels to do all the analysis and derive some equations, right? So don't think that this quasi Fermi level concept is completely useless. It is just that we have not seen any practical relevance of this concept as of now. So okay guys, this was just the last slide for today. If you guys have any doubts, please feel free to poke me. We are already, I guess, 1 minute above our time. Any doubts, guys? Yeah. Yeah. Huh? EV is above EF. Yeah, correct. So you see, okay, so just a minute, just give me a time. You're talking about option number A or option number D? Option number A, yeah. Yeah, okay, so you are asking how this Fermi level actually reduced to this EV? Below EV, I mean. No, the Fermi. EV is above EF, yeah. So now, if you just want to understand this stuff, right? If you want to understand why this is actually happening, then I will recommend you to study about the metal semiconductor junction. Sir will cover it. Sir will cover it, but if I just want to give you a hint, then I will just tell you that there are so many holes that are available in this region, that this region is acting like a metal. This region is acting like a metal, and you don't have to provide any sort of energy. So this region is acting like a reservoir of the holes. So if you just see about so if you have EC, so this is what the so this is what for the semiconductor looks like, right? Difference between EC and EV. This is what the difference between EC and EV looks like for the insulator. For the metals, what did we say? We say that the EC minus EV actually does not even exist. It will be, we don't define the band gap for the metals over there, right? So now we say that metals has so many carriers that are actually, so many electrons are actually available, that we don't even consider the concept of EG over there. But if you look at the concept of EF for the metal, now ideally where should it be? So if I draw EF at this particular point, then I can say that okay, my material is P type, but it is still a semiconductor, correct? If I want to show that material is extremely heavily doped, correct, then the EF has to be extreme, it has to be beyond the EV. So I just cannot explain you a very intuitive reason of why this EF has to be below EV, but just take the example of the metal has so many reservoir of the electrons, that if you want to draw, let's say if you want to draw the EF with respect to EC, correct? So then EF will actually go above the EC over here. Only then it is suggesting that there are so many electrons that are already available in this case. If you draw it like EC and EF, something like this is also telling the material is N type, but it is actually telling you that this material is still acting like something like a semiconductor. It is not a very big reservoir of the electrons. Was that helpful, or it is still a confusion? Okay, okay, great. Guys, any other doubts? Last call for the doubts. After that, we will just end the session. Any doubts? Last call. Okay, guys. So we will close the session. Thank all of you for staying here till 2 hours. So and sorry once again for ruining your evening. Have a great evening ahead and enjoy your weekend. Bye bye, guys. Thank you.